Hi everyone, I've recently played my first 1000 hands of 2NL and I'm excited to report some hands for you guys. So, firstly, I just want to talk about how the first few hands went overall. As you can see, I've filtered it to my first 1266 hands. I got off to a fantastic start. I reached $9 in the first 200 hands, which is pretty amazing. And then after that, this horrendous hand, which I'm going to talk about, and then got back up, but then it just kind of petered out. This like whole stretch of about 800 hands, it's just not a lot happened. But anyway, overall, I made $4 over the 1,200 hands with a win rate of 16 big blinds per 100. Not too bad, not too bad. Um, so let's just get right into some of the hands. I've already preloaded the four biggest cash games that I got myself involved in. And let's go through this one. So, folds to this guy who limps. He's been limping quite a lot, so he's a fishy kind of player. I checked my pocket twos in the big blind. I don't think there's any reason to raise or anything like that. Checking's fine. A flop is set. I check it over to him as I would with my entire range. The reason for that is when I check in the big blind, my range should be weaker than this guy's range overall. So you should really start with a check. He checks back, which is fine. I put his range on like a lot of weak stuff. I wouldn't put him on top pair pretty much ever because he's a fishy kind of player. I don't think he's going to balance like that. So he's not going to have top pair a lot. He's not going to have any sets or two pair or anything like that. The best hand he can really have here is an 8. But yeah, he's going to have a lot of air as well. The turn is the 10 of spades, give me a boat, and I need to start betting. He's going to have a lot of air in his range, so when I bet, I want to choose a size that makes his hands that aren't air just continue, and I want to extract the maximum value. So this is going to get a lot of folds, but when he does have like 8x or an open-ended straight draw or a gut shot or a flush draw, a turn flush draw, then he's going to continue. So this size is fine. The river's the queen of spades. I go ahead and overbet because if I bet, I think his 8s are probably just going to fold, and I'm mainly just targeting flushes. Right, so hands that he would check the flop with, call the turn would be turn flush draws, and then on this card I hope to get paid by these flushes, or even Jack 9 for a straight. He raises, which is, it might look kind of scary at first, but it's not really, because as I said on the flop, he doesn't really have any 10s, because he checked the flop. So he doesn't have any queen 10, or 10-8. The only hand he really might have is like pocket 10s, which trapped the flop, but that's only one combo. A lot of people will just do this with a flush, if they have an ace-high flush, they're going to raise the turn like this. And because I believe this guy's fishy, if I just go all in here, which I do, I think I'm just going to get called by all of his, maybe not all of his flushes, but I think I'll get called by a lot of his flushes. Unfortunately, he actually has Jack 9 of spades for the straight flush. So we lost a 400 big blind pot with a boat versus a straight flush. Fairly unfortunate, and I think that was just incredibly unlucky. I only lose to pocket 10s, Jack 9 of spades, and that's about it. I'm going to get called by all of his ace high flushes and king high flushes, and other jack high flushes as well that limped in. So overall, happy with my play. Just got really unlucky there to lose $4, which is a pretty big deal at these stakes. You can't just lose 200 big blinds very often. Anyway, on with the next hand, I think. Okay. This was a fairly big hand. Let's see what happened. I raised. I make it a fairly large sizing because it's a fishy kind of table. It called, and this is a board that generally favors the caller. But as you can see by his stats, he is extremely wide. So I wouldn't mind a bet or a check here. I think I decided to bet here with jacks because I blocked Jack 9, and even though he can have all the straights, the sets, and maybe all the straights if he has 9-6 suited in his pre-flop flatting range, I don't know, It's hard to tell when the ranges are really wide if what they can have, what they might not have. But in any case, I think it wouldn't be a mistake to just bet here with jacks because he's fishy. Expect to get called a lot. We get min raised, which is overall not a great sign, but still pretty okay. We are ahead of a lot of top pairs that might do this, and we've got equity versus like sets. We turn the set, and we just lead out, which is kind of funny. I think because this guy's pretty fishy, I would expect him to check back a lot of ace 10, king 10, queen 10 kind of hands. So actually I kind of like this lead. It's extremely exploitative, but I think on this kind of card, on this turn, this guy is just going to check back a lot of his sets and top pair and all that kind of stuff. And then we just chop versus his straights. So this is completely fine, I think. And we just get jammed on, which is, it might be queen jack a lot. Queen jack that decides to min raise the flop and just get it on this turn, but you know, there's nothing we can do here. We just call it off. And luckily, we run into 10-9. So 10-9 just rips it in there on the turn, and we scoop that one. That's pretty nice. Okay, this hand. Ace jack of hearts on the button folds to us. We raise it up. We get a caller and another caller, so both the blinds call. We get top pair on the flop, and we get led into. I expect this lead to be pretty much ace x, 9x, and flush draws. Pretty much only, maybe pocket twos, maybe pocket nines, maybe ace 9, maybe ace deuce, but those strong hands, it's kind of villain dependent. It depends on what they're kind of doing. In any case, we've got no choice but to call. Turn trips, so his ace-x becomes more unlikely now. And he leads again for half pot. So we might want to consider raising, but I think calling will be the best line. Raising gets value from worse ace-x and some flush draws. So that wouldn't be too bad against this kind of fishy kind of player. But calling's pretty good as well to keep his bluffs in. If he's doing this with any kind of like spatty bluff or whatever, and we raise, they just fold. So I think calling's fine as well. River the jack of diamonds, which is awesome. We've got the nuts, and he bets again. So there's no other option but to jam, which we do. And we get called by the baby flush. So he had a combo draw, decides to lead, decides to bet again, and then just bet call the river. Unlucky for him, I guess. But he shouldn't really be donking anyway. Okay, the very, very last hand that we're going to go through. I remember this one. This is kind of fun because, well, you'll see post-flop. I raise it with kings. We get 3-bet, which is a great sign. So I put in the 4-bet. I think this 4-bet size is pretty okay. We are 100 bigs deep, so pretty standard. And he makes the call. When he calls the 4-bet, I expect his range to be pretty strong. So aces, kings, queens, jacks, maybe tens, ace king always, maybe ace queen. We flop top set, which is good. And on this board, as the 4-better, with the SPR being like 1.3-ish, it's a really shallow SPR, I believe the optimal strategy in 4-bet pots with really tight ranges is to just bet your entire range for a quarter pot on a king high board in a 4-bet pot. I think that's the most correct. And it's actually kind of funny because we betting a quarter pot and then betting a quarter pot again and then just betting like half pot all in on the river. It looks extremely exploitative, but I think that's actually the most correct thing to do. In reality, I do quarter pot bet and we get called. 10 of spades. Don't really have to be worried about the flush because the only hands he should have that have a flush is ace queen of spades only. So that's fine. We bet a quarter pot again. You could argue for a jam because it's got 75% pot, but I think the problem with the jam is that you let hands like aces go. You know, aces without a spade, you can just easily fold, whereas if you bet a quarter pot, it's less clear. He calls, and he has a 3rd pot left on the river, so I don't think there's any other option but to just jam. So we do. and he was absolutely powering it off with jacks, which is good for me. Not sure if he would have called with jacks on the turn if we made it if we put him all in instead of betting the quarter pot, but whatever works, works. Okay, so those were the four hands that were the biggest hands. Those are the biggest pots. Notice that I lost the biggest pot, but then I won three fairly big pots after that. So overall, did pretty okay in my opinion. Okay, let's move on to the next 1,000 hands. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.